Sarah Martinez wiped the sweat from her forehead as another round of gunfire echoed across the military training range. The desert sun beat down mercilessly on the concrete platform where dozens of soldiers practiced their marksmanship skills. She had been working at Camp Morrison for 3 years now, cleaning the firing range, collecting spent bullet casings, and maintaining the equipment. Most days she felt invisible. The soldiers barely looked at her as she moved between the shooting stations with her cart full of cleaning supplies. They were too focused on their targets, their scores, and impressing their commanding officers. Sarah understood this. She had grown up around military families and knew how important these training sessions were. Her own father had been a soldier, though he never talked much about his service before he passed away when she was 16. What the soldiers didn't know was that Sarah had been watching them carefully. Every day for 3 years she observed their techniques, listened to the instructor's advice, and studied their mistakes. During her lunch breaks, she would sit in the shade and imagine herself holding a rifle, aiming at those distant targets. She had never fired a gun in her life, but she had absorbed more knowledge about shooting than most people learn in formal training. Colonel James Harrison was different from the other officers. He always nodded politely when he saw Sarah working, and sometimes he even said good morning. He was in his 50s with gray hair and kind eyes that seemed to notice everything around him. The soldiers respected him greatly, and Sarah could see why. He never shouted or belittled anyone, but his quiet authority commanded attention. On this particular Tuesday morning, Colonel Harrison was conducting a special training session for a group of new recruits. These young men and women had just finished basic training and were eager to prove themselves. Sarah watched from her usual spot near the equipment shed as the colonel explained the day's exercise. "Today we're testing your precision and consistency," the colonel announced. "You'll each fire 20 rounds at the 100-meter target. Your score will determine your marksmanship classification." The recruits shifted nervously, knowing this test would affect their military records permanently. As Sarah continued her cleaning duties, she noticed something troubling. Several of the recruits were making basic mistakes. Their stance was wrong, their grip was too tight, and they weren't controlling their breathing properly. She wanted to help them, but she knew her place. She was just the cleaning lady, and these were trained soldiers. The morning progressed slowly, with mixed results. Some recruits performed well, but others struggled significantly. Sarah felt a pang of sympathy as she watched a young woman named Private Johnson fight back tears after scoring poorly. The private reminded Sarah of herself at that age, determined, but lacking confidence. During the lunch break, Sarah was emptying trash cans when she overheard a conversation that made her heart sink. 2 senior sergeants were discussing the poor performance of some recruits, particularly the female soldiers. "Maybe they're just not cut out for this kind of precision work," one sergeant said dismissively. "Some people have it, some don't." Sarah gripped the trash bag tighter, feeling anger rise in her chest. She had watched these same sergeants make plenty of mistakes during their own practice sessions. They had no right to judge others so harshly, especially when they weren't offering proper guidance. As the afternoon session began, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She couldn't stand by and watch talented young soldiers fail because of poor instruction and unfair judgment. She had knowledge that could help them, and she was going to find a way to share it. The opportunity came sooner than expected. During a brief break between firing rounds, Private Johnson approached the water station near Sarah's equipment shed. The young woman looked frustrated and defeated. "Excuse me," Sarah said quietly, pretending to organize her supplies. "I couldn't help. But notice you're having trouble with your shots going low and to the left." Private Johnson looked surprised that the cleaning lady had spoken to her. "Yes, ma'am. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I've been practicing for weeks." Sarah glanced around to make sure no instructors were watching. "Try adjusting your grip. You're squeezing too hard with your right hand. Let your left hand do most of the work and breathe out halfway before you squeeze the trigger." The private looked skeptical but nodded politely. When the training resumed, Sarah watched anxiously as Private Johnson took her position. To Sarah's delight, the young woman's next 5 shots were significantly better. Word began to spread quietly among the struggling recruits that the cleaning lady had given helpful advice. Colonel Harrison noticed the sudden improvement in several soldiers' performance, but he couldn't figure out what had changed. He began paying closer attention to everything happening on the range, including the quiet woman who seemed to blend into the background. The next morning brought an unexpected challenge to Camp Morrison. Colonel Harrison received urgent orders that half of his instructors needed to report to another base immediately for a special assignment. This left him short-staffed during one of the most important training weeks of the year. Sarah arrived for work to find the firing range in chaos. Dozens of soldiers were scheduled for qualification tests, but there weren't enough instructors to supervise them properly. She watched as Colonel Harrison paced back and forth, trying to figure out how to manage the situation. Meanwhile, word about Sarah's helpful advice had spread further among the recruits. During the previous evening, Private Johnson had shared the shooting tips with her bunkmates, and several of them had approached Sarah for guidance. She felt both proud and nervous about this development. Sergeant Miller, one of the remaining instructors, was struggling to help a group of 8 soldiers who were all having different problems with their accuracy. Sarah could see the frustration building in both the instructor and the students. The sergeant was a decent marksman himself, but he wasn't skilled at diagnosing and correcting the subtle issues that were affecting each soldier's performance. As Sarah organized ammunition supplies, she found herself standing near the struggling group. She listened as Sergeant Miller gave the same generic advice to every soldier. Just focus and aim better. This wasn't helpful to soldiers who had deeper technical problems with their shooting form. Private Chen, a young man from California, was particularly frustrated. His shots were scattered all over the target with no consistent pattern. Sarah could see that he was flinching before each shot, probably due to nervousness about the loud noise and recoil. This was a common problem that had a specific solution. Unable to watch the young soldier fail, Sarah approached Private Chen during a water break. "You're anticipating the shot," she told him quietly. "Try this. Load your rifle, but don't put your finger on the trigger yet. Go through all your aiming steps, then count to 3 before you even touch the trigger. It will help you stay relaxed." Private Chen looked surprised but followed her advice. His next group of shots showed immediate improvement, landing in a tight cluster near the center of the target. Other soldiers nearby had overheard Sarah's advice and began implementing her suggestions as well. Sergeant Miller noticed the sudden improvement in his group's performance but couldn't understand what had caused the change. He assumed his own instruction had finally gotten through to them. However, Colonel Harrison was watching from his office window and had observed the entire interaction between Sarah and the soldiers. As the day progressed, more soldiers began discreetly seeking Sarah's advice. She helped Private Williams correct his breathing technique, showed Private Rodriguez how to properly align his sights, and taught Private Thompson about follow-through after taking a shot. Each piece of advice was specific to the individual's problem and delivered in simple, easy-to-understand language. The most challenging case came late in the afternoon. Private Mason, a tough young man from Texas, had been struggling with marksmanship since he arrived at the base. His pride prevented him from asking for help from the official instructors, but his scores were so low that he was in danger of being dismissed from his desired military specialty. Private Mason had been watching other soldiers receive advice from Sarah, and he was curious but skeptical. During a long break between sessions, he approached her hesitantly. "Ma'am, I heard you've been helping some of the others with their shooting," he said, trying to sound casual. "I don't suppose you have any ideas about why my shots keep going, wide right?" Sarah studied his stance and grip as he demonstrated his shooting position without ammunition. She immediately spotted several issues that were working together to create his accuracy problems. "Your right elbow is too high, and you're canting the rifle slightly to the left to compensate," she explained. "Also, you're pulling the trigger with the tip of your finger instead of the pad. Try lowering that elbow and using more of your finger on the trigger." Private Mason was amazed by how specific and technical her advice was. "How do you know all this stuff? Are you a former military?" Sarah shook her head. "Just observant, I guess. I've been working here for 3 years and watching thousands of people shoot. You start to notice patterns." When Private Mason returned to the firing line, his improvement was dramatic. His shots went from scattered across the entire target to grouped tightly in the scoring rings. The change was so obvious that other soldiers stopped their own practice to watch. Colonel Harrison had been observing these interactions throughout the day, and he was becoming increasingly intrigued by the cleaning lady who seemed to have an extraordinary understanding of marksmanship. That evening, after the soldiers had returned to their barracks, he decided to learn more about Sarah Martinez. He pulled her personnel file and discovered that she had been a model employee for 3 years, always punctual, never complained, and received excellent reviews from her supervisors. Her background check showed that she had grown up on a ranch in New Mexico, where her father had served in the military before becoming a rancher. The file mentioned that she had helped support her family after her father's death, working various jobs before finding steady employment at Camp Morrison. What intrigued Colonel Harrison most was that Sarah had never mentioned her knowledge of shooting to anyone. She seemed content to work quietly in the background, helping soldiers only when they approached her directly. This suggested a level of humility and professionalism that impressed him greatly. Colonel Harrison decided to test Sarah's knowledge in a more direct way. The next morning, he arrived at the firing range earlier than usual and found Sarah preparing the shooting stations for the day's training. She was carefully checking each lane, ensuring the targets were properly aligned and the safety barriers were secure. "Good morning, Sarah," the colonel said, approaching her work area. "I've been noticing some remarkable improvements in our soldiers' marksmanship scores lately. Do you have any insights about what might be causing this?" Sarah paused in her work, unsure how to respond. She didn't want to get in trouble for overstepping her boundaries, but she also didn't want to lie to a superior officer. "Well, sir, I think the soldiers are just working harder and paying more attention to the basic," she said carefully. Colonel Harrison smiled slightly. "I see. And would you say that proper fundamentals are the most important aspect of accurate shooting?" "Yes, sir. From what I've observed, most accuracy problems come from basic technique issues rather than equipment problems or lack of natural ability," Sarah replied, then immediately worried she had said too much. The colonel nodded thoughtfully. "That's a very astute observation. Tell me, what do you think is the most common mistake you see soldiers making?" Sarah hesitated, but the colonel's genuine interest encouraged her to continue. "Trigger control, sir. Most people either jerk the trigger or use the wrong part of their finger. They also tend to hold their breath too long, which makes them shake. And how would you correct those problems?" Sarah found herself explaining the proper trigger technique and breathing methods in detail, using clear language and practical examples. Colonel Harrison listened intently, occasionally asking follow-up questions that revealed even more depth to her knowledge. "Where did you learn all of this, Sarah?" he asked finally. "My father taught me some basics when I was young, sir, but mostly I've learned by watching and thinking about what works and what doesn't. I've seen thousands of people shoot over the past 3 years, and after a while, you start to notice patterns." Colonel Harrison was impressed not only by Sarah's knowledge, but by her analytical approach to learning. She had essentially conducted her own informal study of marksmanship by carefully observing and mentally cataloging what she saw. Later that morning, the colonel made an unprecedented decision. He announced to his remaining instructors that he wanted to try a new approach to help the struggling soldiers. He would personally oversee a special remedial training session, and he wanted Sarah to assist him. Sergeant Miller and the other instructors were puzzled by this announcement. They couldn't understand why the colonel would involve a civilian cleaning lady in official military training. However, they knew better than to question Colonel Harrison's judgment directly. The special session included 12 soldiers who had been having significant accuracy problems. Colonel Harrison introduced Sarah simply as an expert consultant who has been studying marksmanship techniques. He didn't elaborate on her background, leaving the soldiers curious but respectful. Sarah felt nervous as she stood before the group of soldiers, but Colonel Harrison's calm presence gave her confidence. He began by asking her to demonstrate proper shooting stance and grip using an unloaded rifle. As Sarah positioned herself at the firing line, something remarkable happened. Her movements were fluid and confident, displaying textbook form that impressed even the experienced instructors. She had never held a loaded rifle, but her 3 years of mental practice and observation had prepared her well. "Notice how she positions her feet," Colonel Harrison commented to the group. "Shoulder width apart, slight forward lean, weight evenly distributed. This creates a stable platform that won't shift during recoil. Sarah demonstrated the proper grip, sight alignment, and breathing technique while the soldiers watched attentively. Her explanations were clear and practical, focusing on why each element was important rather than just how to do it. When the live firing began, Sarah worked alongside Colonel Harrison to help each soldier individually. She could quickly diagnose their specific problems and offer targeted solutions. Private Martinez was pulling his shots left because he was squeezing his whole hand instead of just his trigger finger. Private Lee was consistently shooting high because she was lifting her head to see the target better, which changed her sight picture. The results were dramatic. Within 2 hours, every soldier in the group had improved significantly. Several went from failing scores to expert-level performance. The transformation was so remarkable that other instructors began gathering to observe the session. Sergeant Miller approached Colonel Harrison during a break. "Sir, I have to ask, how does she know all this? Her teaching methods are better than most of our certified instructors." Colonel Harrison smiled. "Sometimes the best teachers are those who have learned through careful observation and genuine interest rather than formal training. She has spent 3 years studying this subject more intensively than most people study in official courses." As the day concluded, Sarah felt a mixture of pride and anxiety. She had proven that her knowledge was valuable, but she worried about how this might change her position at the base. She enjoyed her quiet work routine and didn't want to create conflict with the official instructors. Colonel Harrison seemed to read her concerns. "Sarah, you have a gift for teaching and an exceptional understanding of marksmanship. I'd like to discuss some possibilities with you about how we might better utilize your talents." That evening, Colonel Harrison spent time reviewing the day's shooting scores and thinking about Sarah's remarkable performance. He realized that the base had been overlooking a valuable resource for 3 years. More importantly, he recognized that Sarah's humble, analytical approach to learning could benefit the entire training program. Word of Sarah's remarkable teaching abilities spread quickly through Camp Morrison. Soldiers who had participated in the special training session shared their improved scores with friends, and soon everyone wanted to know about the cleaning lady, who could transform poor shooters into marksmen. However, not everyone was pleased with this development. Some of the certified instructors felt threatened by Sarah's success and questioned whether a civilian should be involved in official military training. Sergeant Davidson, in particular, was vocal about his concerns. "This sets a dangerous precedent," he complained to Colonel Harrison. "We have trained professionals for a reason. What message does it send if we start replacing qualified instructors with maintenance staff?" Colonel Harrison listened patiently to these concerns, but he was more interested in results than protocols. The soldiers Sarah had helped were performing better than they ever had before, and their confidence had improved dramatically along with their scores. Meanwhile, Sarah continued her regular cleaning duties while occasionally helping soldiers during breaks. She was careful not to interfere with official instruction and always deferred to the certified instructors when they were present. Despite her caution, tensions continued to build. The situation came to a head during a visit from General Patricia Webb, the regional commander who oversaw several military bases including Camp Morrison. General Webb was known for her no-nonsense approach and her focus on measurable results. She had come to Camp Morrison to review training effectiveness and address concerns about declining marksmanship scores across the region. Colonel Harrison saw this visit as an opportunity to demonstrate the improvements his base had achieved. He arranged for General Webb to observe a standard qualification test, including several soldiers who had recently received Sarah's coaching. General Webb was immediately impressed by the high scores she witnessed, but she was even more intrigued when she learned about the unconventional source of the improvement. She asked to meet with Sarah privately to understand how a civilian employee had developed such expertise. Sarah felt intimidated meeting with such a high-ranking officer, but General Webb's direct manner put her somewhat at ease. "I understand. You've been helping our soldiers improve their shooting," the general said. "Tell me about your approach." Sarah explained her observation-based learning method and described how she identified common problems and their solutions. General Webb asked detailed questions about specific techniques and was impressed by the depth and clarity of Sarah's responses. "Have you ever considered formal instructor training?" General Webb asked. Sarah shook her head. I don't have the right background or education for something like that, ma'am. I just help when I can. General Webb smiled. Sometimes the best qualifications come from results rather than certificates. Would you be interested in participating in a formal evaluation of your teaching abilities? Sarah wasn't sure what this meant, but she agreed. General Webb arranged for an unusual test. Sarah would teach a group of soldiers who had never met her before, while military education experts observed and evaluated her methods. The test group consisted of 8 soldiers from another base who had been struggling with marksmanship. They knew nothing about Sarah's background and assumed she was a certified instructor, brought in for the evaluation. Sarah felt nervous as she began the session, but she quickly fell into her natural teaching rhythm. She started by observing each soldier's shooting form, then identified their individual problems. Her explanations were patient and detailed, and she used analogies that made complex concepts easy to understand. Think of the trigger like a violin string, she told one soldier who was having trouble with smooth trigger pull. You want to apply steady pressure until it releases cleanly, not jerk it and make noise. The military education experts were amazed by Sarah's natural teaching ability. She demonstrated advanced diagnostic skills, adapting her instruction methods to different learning styles, and maintaining positive rapport with all the soldiers. Most impressively, she achieved significant improvement in every participant within just 3 hours. Dr. Martinez, the chief military education specialist, approached General Webb after the session. This is remarkable, he said. Her teaching methodology is more effective than many of our formally trained instructors. She has an intuitive understanding of adult learning principles. General Webb nodded. What would it take to give her official instructor certification? Normally, it would require months of formal education and certification programs, Dr. Martinez replied. But given her demonstrated competence, we might be able to create an accelerated pathway based on skill demonstration, rather than classroom hours. As news of the evaluation spread through Camp Morrison, reactions were mixed. The soldiers were unanimously supportive. They had seen the results of Sarah's help firsthand. Some instructors remained skeptical, while others were curious about her methods and wanted to learn from her. Colonel Harrison felt vindicated in his decision to support Sarah's involvement in training. He had taken a risk by allowing an unconventional approach, but the results spoke for themselves. More importantly, he had recognized talent that might have remained hidden forever. Sarah herself was overwhelmed by the attention and opportunities being presented to her. She had never imagined that her quiet observations could lead to such dramatic changes in her life. The possibility of becoming an official instructor was both exciting and terrifying. General Webb's recommendation set in motion a series of events that would test Sarah's abilities in ways she had never imagined. The Military Education Command decided to fast-track her through an intensive instructor certification program, but first, she would need to prove herself in a high-stakes situation. The opportunity came sooner than anyone expected. Camp Morrison was selected to host a regional marksmanship competition involving elite soldiers from 5 different bases. The competition would include individual and team events, with rankings that could affect the careers of participating soldiers and the reputations of their home bases. Colonel Harrison's team had performed poorly in previous competitions, largely due to inconsistent marksmanship training. This year, however, he had a secret weapon: Sarah's coaching methods. He proposed that Sarah work intensively with the Camp Morrison team for 2 weeks before the competition. The proposal generated controversy at the highest levels of military command. Traditional instructors argued that allowing a civilian contractor to coach a competition team violated established protocols. Supporters countered that results mattered more than credentials, and Sarah's track record spoke for itself. General Webb ultimately approved the arrangement with one significant condition: Sarah would be required to demonstrate her own shooting abilities publicly before the competition began. If she could not perform at an expert level herself, her coaching credentials would be questioned. This condition terrified Sarah. Despite her extensive theoretical knowledge, she had never fired a rifle in her life. All of her expertise came from observation and analysis, not personal experience. She had just 2 weeks to learn how to apply everything she had taught others. Colonel Harrison arranged for private shooting sessions where Sarah could practice, without an audience. Her first day on the range was humbling. Her shots were scattered wildly despite her perfect form and technique. The gap between knowing what to do and actually doing it was larger than she had expected. "Don't worry," Colonel Harrison reassured her after a frustrating first session. "You understand the principles better than anyone. Your body just needs time to learn what your mind already knows." Sarah practiced every morning and evening, applying her own teaching methods to her personal shooting development. She analyzed each shot, identified her mistakes, and made systematic corrections. Her engineering approach to learning served her well, and her improvement was steady if not spectacular. Meanwhile, the Camp Morrison competition team was training under Sarah's guidance during the day. The team consisted of 12 soldiers, including several who had been struggling with accuracy before receiving Sarah's coaching. Private Johnson, who had been one of the first to benefit from Sarah's advice, was selected as the team captain. Sarah's coaching methods proved highly effective with the competition team. She identified each shooter's strengths and weaknesses, then developed customized training plans to address their specific needs. More importantly, she taught them how to analyze and correct their own performance, making them more independent and confident shooters. The team's practice scores improved dramatically over the 2 weeks of intensive training. Soldiers who had barely qualified for the team were now shooting expert-level scores consistently. Word of their improvement reached the other competing bases, creating additional pressure and scrutiny. 3 days before the competition, Sarah faced her own shooting test in front of military officials and education experts. She would need to shoot expert-level scores in 3 different categories: precision shooting at long range, rapid fire at medium range, and practical shooting scenarios. Sarah's nerves were evident as she took her position for the first event. Her hands trembled slightly as she loaded her rifle, but she forced herself to follow the same systematic approach she taught her students. She controlled her breathing, aligned her sights carefully, and applied steady trigger pressure. Her first shot was perfect, dead center of the target. The second shot was equally good. As Sarah settled into her rhythm, her natural, analytical abilities took over. She made micro-adjustments after each shot, reading wind conditions and compensating for environmental factors with remarkable precision. When the scoring was complete, Sarah had achieved expert qualification in all 3 categories. More impressively, her scores were higher than most of the certified instructors who were present. The crowd of observers was stunned. They had just witnessed someone learn to shoot at an expert level in just 2 weeks. Dr. Martinez shook his head in amazement. "I've never seen anything like this. She has an intuitive understanding of shooting mechanics that most people never develop even with years of practice." General Webb was equally impressed. The question now is whether her coaching methods can produce results under competition pressure. Tomorrow we'll find out if all this preparation translates to actual performance. That evening, Sarah met with her team for a final strategy session. The soldiers were confident and relaxed, trusting completely in the methods she had taught them. Private Johnson spoke for the group when she said, "We know we're ready. You've given us tools we never had before." Sarah felt a mixture of pride and anxiety as she prepared for the next day's competition. She had come so far from the invisible cleaning lady who watched soldiers practice from the shadows. Tomorrow, her unconventional methods would be tested against the traditional training approaches used by the military's best marksmen. The day of the regional marksmanship competition dawned clear and calm, perfect conditions for precision shooting. Representatives from 5 military bases had gathered at Camp Morrison, along with senior officers, military education specialists, and local media covering the event. Sarah arrived early to walk the firing range and check conditions. Her analytical mind automatically noted the wind patterns, lighting conditions, and potential challenges the shooters would face. She felt nervous, but confident in her team's preparation. The competition began with individual precision events. Camp Morrison's soldiers, coached by Sarah's methods, performed remarkably well in the early rounds. Private Johnson shot a perfect score in the 200-meter precision event, while Private Chen achieved his personal best in rapid-fire competition. Other teams began to take notice of Camp Morrison's strong performance. Coaches from competing bases wondered what had changed since Camp Morrison had traditionally finished near the bottom of regional competitions. Some recognized Sarah from the previous day's demonstration and realized she was the source of the improvement. The most challenging event was the team precision relay, where 4 shooters from each base would fire simultaneously at long-range targets. This event required not only individual skill, but also coordination and mental toughness under pressure. Camp Morrison had never placed higher than 4th in this event. As her team prepared for their turn, Sarah gathered them for final instructions. Remember, you've done this perfectly in practice hundreds of times. Trust your training, focus on your fundamentals, and don't let the crowd distract you. The Camp Morrison team took their positions on the firing line. Sarah stood behind them in the coaching area, her heart pounding as she watched her students prepare for the most important shots of their military careers. The range officer called for the shooters to begin. Sarah watched as her team settled into their shooting positions with the smooth, controlled movements she had taught them. Their breathing was steady, their grip was consistent, and their sight alignment looked perfect. The first shots rang out simultaneously, and Sarah could immediately see through her binoculars that all 4 shots were excellent. The second round was equally good. As the relay continued, Camp Morrison maintained their precision, while other teams began showing signs of pressure. When the shooting was complete, the electronic scoring system showed results that shocked everyone present. Camp Morrison had achieved the highest team precision score in the history of the regional competition. Their 4-shooter average was higher than the previous record by a significant margin. The crowd erupted in applause, but Sarah felt overwhelmed by emotion. These soldiers had trusted her unconventional methods and achieved something extraordinary. More importantly, they had gained confidence and skills that would serve them throughout their military careers. Colonel Harrison found Sarah after the team scores were announced. His eyes were bright with pride and amazement. "Sarah, what you've accomplished here goes far beyond winning a competition. You've shown that talent and dedication can overcome any barrier." As the competition concluded and awards were presented, Sarah received recognition that she had never imagined possible. General Webb presented her with a special commendation for excellence in military education, making her the first civilian contractor to receive such an honor. More significantly, several other base commanders approached Sarah about bringing her coaching methods to their facilities. Dr. Martinez offered her a position developing new marksmanship curriculum for the entire military education system. But the moment that would stay with Sarah forever came during the closing ceremony. As she stood with the winning Camp Morrison team, Colonel Harrison called for attention and made an unprecedented gesture. The seasoned officer, respected throughout the military for his leadership and integrity, came to attention and rendered a formal military salute to Sarah. The symbolism was clear. He was acknowledging her not as a civilian employee, but as a valued professional who had earned his complete respect. The entire assembly, including officers from all competing bases, followed Colonel Harrison's lead and stood at attention. For Sarah Martinez, the woman who had spent 3 years being invisible on the firing line, this moment of recognition represented a complete transformation. Later, as the celebration continued, Sarah reflected on her incredible journey. She had discovered that careful observation, analytical thinking, and genuine care for others could overcome any lack of formal credentials. Her success had opened doors not just for herself, but for other unconventional thinkers who might have valuable contributions to offer. The shy cleaning lady who once watched soldiers practice from the shadows had become a respected instructor and innovator. But more importantly, she had proven that everyone has unique talents waiting to be discovered, sometimes in the most unexpected places. Sarah's story became legendary throughout the military education system, inspiring others to look beyond traditional qualifications and recognize talent wherever it might be found. Colonel Harrison's salute had acknowledged not just Sarah's achievements, but the principle that excellence deserves recognition, regardless of its source. As Sarah began her new career as a certified marksmanship instructor, she carried with her the lesson that had guided her success. The most powerful qualification is the ability to help others achieve their potential.